Thank you very much. There's one guy here, I don't know if he's in the room, but he came up to me. He actually watches it twice a week, religiously. Hopefully he's here. But so Detroit Rock City was a dream come true for me because I really am a giant Kiss fan. It was something that was. I grew up in Metuchen, New Jersey. I saw Kiss for the first time when I was 13 years old at Madison Square Garden, December 17th, 1977, for the Love Gun tour. And that day, I knew that I somehow wanted to be a part of Kiss, but I didn't know how or what. But years later, in 1983, when Kiss took off their makeup and they put out "Lick It Up," they were doing a meet and greet tour of record stores. How many people know what records are? How many people ever heard of Sam Goody Record Shop? That's right. So Sam Goody's in New York was doing a signing of "Lick It Up" with Kiss. And I said to myself, this is my chance to actually meet Gene Simmons. And probably will only get 2 seconds with him. How do I turn those 2 seconds into a lifelong connection? Well, I had heard that Gene really loved horror movies. And I also heard somebody once said, if you ever meet your idol or hero, talk to them about something other than what they're famous for. So if you meet an astronaut, don't ask him about space. Ask him about, if you heard he likes stamp collecting, because you'll stand out, they'll get excited because everybody's asking them the same thing, and you'll probably get some time with them. So I also am a writer-director of horror movies, and I started that when I was 16. I did a New Jersey horror movie called The Deadly Spawn, and there was a severed head prop left over from this. And I thought, well, if Gene likes horror movies, maybe I put the severed head in a box, wrapped it up with a bow. Now I would be arrested for being a jihadist if I ever did something like this. This would never happen today. But when it came my time to see Gene, I put the box in front of him, and he just stopped everything, and he opened it up, and he took it out, and he started licking it and doing all kinds of fun stuff, and everybody was taking pictures, and he pulled me in for a picture. And I had my arm around him, and as I walked away, my ring caught his hair and whipped his head back. And in that moment, he looked at me, and it just came out of my mouth. I don't know where I thought of this. I said, I'm a journalist for Fangoria magazine, and we want to interview you about your love of horror movies. I don't know where that came from. It wasn't prepared. And his eyes went wide, and he said, you're not going to ask me about Kiss, just horror? I said, yeah. He goes, all right, here's a number, and have your magazine call my assistant, and we'll set it up. Well, now I had this lie that was, I was a lie away from getting to interview Gene Simmons. So I was such a geek that I actually knew the phone number by heart of Fangoria magazine. I went to NYU, I went to film school, and I used to, go to the magazine office. So I went out to a payphone, payphones, put in my dime and got the magazine. I said, this is Tim Sullivan, the kid from Deadly Spawn, and Gene Simmons wants to do his first non-rock and roll interview with Fangoria. And they're like, oh wow, how do we get in touch? I was like, well, you get in touch through me, because I'm the only one who will do the interview. I'm his good friend, and he says he'll do it with me. And they're all like, have you ever done anything like this before? I said, well, I interviewed my high school gym teacher when he was becoming a state trooper and they're like, that doesn't count. And I was like, well, I can do it. And there's silence, and then they go, okay, we'll give you $100. I was like, wow. So now my lies canceled each other out. Not only was I interviewing Gene Simmons, now I was a journalist for Fangoria magazine. So I'll never forget that day. At the time, Kiss was represented by Howard Marks Management, and they're on Park Avenue. I went there, and this is like the mystery, and Paul and Gene say they don't remember this, but I think it has to do with something that Vinnie Vincent wrote and played on the song. But I went up into their office, and Paul was playing Gene. They were in another room, and Paul was playing Gene a new demo they had recorded. And it was awesome, and the song was called What You See Is What You Get, and it's like vintage Lick It Up era Kiss. And that was that was what they were working on for their next album, which became Animalize. And Paul walks out, and he looks at me, and he's like, "Good, huh?" And I go, "Real good." And he walked away, because I wasn't interviewing him, so he didn't have anything else to say. But they put me in a room, I had my little tape recorder, and all of a sudden Gene walks in, and he's very intimidating, because he's gonna show me how much he knows about horror movies. Well, I knew a lot too, and we started doing trivia, and I actually stumped him on a question. He couldn't answer it, and from that moment on, he became my buddy. And I made sure that after the magazine interview came out, that I sent him copies, and always found a reason to keep in touch. And as a result of that, to my amazement, during the 80s, anytime Kiss played New York or New Jersey, I'd get a call from Gene, as somebody with Howard Marks, we're playing, Gene has tickets and passes waiting for you. And this was insane, I couldn't believe this. Somehow he thought I was this big Hollywood guy, because I went to NYU. Eventually I moved to California, and I started working at New Line Cinema in development. And one day Gene calls me up and said some fan had written this script called Detroit Rock City, and it was actually very good. And he wanted to know if I would read it and see if it had any merit, because my job at the time at New Line was to read scripts and write what's called coverage about them. And basically, the executives didn't have the time to read the script, so I would read the scripts for $50 a script, and then they would get paid, $50,000 a month to tell people my opinion. And so I read the script, and I went into the head of New Line, Mike DeLuca, and I said, "Mike, we have to make this movie." And I told him what it was about, and he says, "Yeah, but you're biased, you like Kiss." I said, "No, it could be ABBA, it could be Aerosmith. You take out Kiss, it's still a great coming-of-age story." And he said, "It sounds great, let's do it." And I was like, "Really?" I said, "Well, there's one issue." And he's like, "What?" I said, "Gene wants me to be a producer on it." And he looks at me. I don't know where I got this temerity to say this kind of stuff, but I just was like, and he looks at me and he's like, "Okay." So like that day I went into the office as a $50 a script reader, and I left the office as the producer of the Kiss movie. This was 1998. It was unbelievable. I've never since had a movie happen so quickly and easily. Literally, I read the script in June, and by August we were in Toronto filming, and it was hands down the greatest experience of my life. I was definitely the uber Kiss fan on it, so I made sure that I literally didn't care about, I literally made the movie for me. If I liked it and it had everything in it that I as a Kiss fan liked, I just assumed that the Kiss fans would like it. And everyone laughed at me, and Mike Brandvold, who is on Three Sides of the Coin, he was at the time with, I think, Kiss Online, and he was very instrumental in reaching out to the fans. So anytime we needed a prop or we needed people to come and be extras, I would get in touch with him, he would get the word out, and everything would happen. And it was just an amazing experience all the way through. I wanted to have the best premiere ever. And I wanted Kiss to play at the premiere, and and the only way to do that was to have them play outside, and the only way to do that was to take over a parking lot at UCLA and the college, and we had to make it a no-fly zone, and it turned out it was going to cost like $1 million. And New Line was like, "No way are we spending $1 million on the premiere for this movie." And I said, "It's Kiss. You either do it big or you don't do it at all." And they're like, "Well, we won't do it at all then." I said, so I thought, what would Gene Simmons do? I got a light bulb went over my head, and I called up VH1, and I said, "I'll tell you what. We have been going around the different networks. We've gone to Fox and CW to offer them the broadcast rights to the live broadcast of the premiere. Kiss is going to perform, Cheap Trick, Everclear. We will, you'll be able to be the only people on the red carpet, interview everybody, you have access, you can do it live. No one's ever broadcast a premiere live before." And they're like, sounds great, how much? I said, 1.2 million for the broadcast rights. And they said, great. So then I went back to New Line and said, well, got it covered, and I made you $200,000. And with that $200,000, we are going to do a better poster than the crap that you put out. So it was just, you know, I must say, Gene taught me a lot, you know, and I was just like, and then they were just going to put out a DVD with no extras, and I was like, no, 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 we're doing this, we're doing that. And it's like I still am working on this film. You know, we put it out on Blu-ray last year, and I oversaw that, and it's like, I remember that night at the premiere, it was like everything came together that I worked for. And I remember driving home and just thinking to myself, you know, if tonight was the last night of my life, I'd be content because I produced the Kiss movie. And since then, everything else I just look at as gravy, and it's been great gravy because I've been able to, from that I started writing and directing horror movies. But the root of everything that I am, the root of my career, the root of how I approach things goes right back to my love of Kiss, what Kiss stands for, and just the adulation of the Kiss members, which has turned into deep friendships and you know, creative partnerships. I've done several projects with Gene since. I'm currently working on a project with Eric Singer, and what's really cool is through the years I have had the most bizarre, unbelievable adventures with each Kiss member, except Vinny and Mark St. John. But the stories, like, and you have to be careful because if you write the book, you know, it might be fun, but then you're going to be like, we're not talking to you. But that's how it all happened, and you know. If anybody has questions, you know, I have lots of stories. It could be about Detroit Rock City, it could be about anything else, you know. I have been a fly on the wall for so much. I was featured in Peter Criss's biography, and I was featured in Ken Sharp's Kiss and Tell, and literally, you know, 34 years of friendship with Gene Simmons, you know, it's just insane. So, any questions, just ask away.
I got a question.
Yes, sir.
When you started the movie Detroit Rock City,
yes,
and the story that where'd you come up with the story? Was it actual incidents that happened in your life? Was it like you were that kid growing up, going to that
the gentleman asked, where did the story from Detroit Rock City came from? Well, it's very interesting because there's 4 people who I really consider to be the alter egos of the 4 kids in the movie, you know, Lex, Jam, Trip, and Hawk. And that's me, the director, Adam Rifkin, the editor, Pete Chink, and the writer, Carl Dupre. Now, Carl Dupre, he says that he's pretty much Lex, and he wrote the script. But when the script came, it was very good, but Adam Rifkin and I, especially Adam Rifkin, came up with a lot of other stuff, and then as it went along, you know, a script is really like a blueprint, and then as you go along, you keep adding stuff, and it became more personal, and things that, you know, lines of dialogue, you know, like just one of the lines is, you know, Kiss would never do a disco song, you know, and stuff like that, because we know for the fans that they did it the year later. But I would say that if I had to say which character I was most like, probably Jam, except my mother, who is here, was not at all like Mrs. Bruce. She was very nurturing of it. In fact, last couple weeks ago, I took her to see Kiss, and Gene asked me how much I would sell her to him for. And, but, you know, he just wanted to give me a guitar pick, and that wasn't enough. But all those stories are all really happened to one of us. And what we, you know, I don't really think of Detroit Rock City as the Kiss movie. I think of it as the Kiss fan movie, because it really is for the fans, about the fans, and that period in your life when you're like 13, 14, and you discover rock and roll for the first time, and it's, you know, you get your first garage band, and suddenly you kind of figure out who you are, and you come into your own. And everything is just literally larger than life when you're a teenager. So a lot of the things in the movie were exaggerated because we thought of it as if this was those guys now looking back and telling what happened, it would be exaggerated. One of the things that was in the script that never happened, to my regret, was the concept was originally for each Kiss member to have cameos in it without makeup, kind of like in The Wizard of Oz in the beginning when you had the Tin Man and the Cowardly Lion with, you know, and Peter was appropriately going to play the priest, and Ace was going to be the Scalpa, and Paul was going to be the MC at the strip club, and Gene was going to be the radio disc jockey. And unfortunately, in fact, we were originally filming the concert sequence in LA, but their tour at the time, the Psycho Circus tour, added so many more dates because it was doing so well that originally we were going to have them for 4 days of filming, and it turned out to just be 1. And we shot the concert sequence in Hamilton, Ontario, because the day before they had played in Buffalo, New York. And we had them for 1 day. It was probably the longest day of their life because we had to have them come at 4 in the morning, and they had to get in costume and do all the photos for the posters and the publicity. Then they had to do all the interviews for, you know, the EPKs, and then they had to do the song, record it. We started at 4 a.m. and finished at 2 a.m. And they performed Detroit Rock City about 30 times all the way through. And what's amazing is we had about 15,000 fans show up, and they were all there. We didn't lose anybody. They were maybe 500 because the guys are so gracious. In between takes, I mean, I remember very vividly standing on the stage, and the fans would come, and I would just reach out and grab something and give it to the guys to sign. They would come up, and they just were, you know, it was a really amazing experience. Then the other day that we had with them, I was always, you know, like Doc McGee was like, well, just use the version of Detroit Rock City from Alive 2 to use this. And I said, but we can't. I made up a lie. I said, we can't separate the sound of the audience from the music. So we need to re-record it new. Because I just wanted to be in the studio when Kiss recorded, so but that is one of my favorite days of my life because, you know, it was very unfortunate when Kiss got back together and everyone was waiting for the Psycho Circus album, and it came out, and I don't really think they actually all sat in a room together and recorded anything on that album. You know, so I was determined to get him in the studio, and it was very interesting because Tommy Thayer was the sound engineer that day, and it was me and Adam Rifkin, and we went into this recording studio in LA on Sunset Boulevard, and we got there at 6, and between 6 and 12, we started with nothing, and at the end of the night had a full recorded version of Detroit Rock City, where the end of it was at that time they were doing Black Diamond, like at the end of Detroit Rock City, like the whole thing when, and it was unbelievable because Peter went in first and he sat at his drums, and Paul stood in front of him, faced him, and he played the song, and he was kind of like a track, and Peter played along. He was on fire, and that took about an hour. We recorded that, and then Gene came in and played the bass against the playback of Peter's drums. And the whole time, they were all sitting in this recording booth, having a lot of fun, you know, kidding around. And the mood was really good. And then I'll never forget, Ace was sitting on a chair, and Paul sat next to him, and they just sat there together in the recording booth and played the guitar together, like the whole solo. It was unbelievable. And then the very last thing was Paul recorded his vocals, and other guys did the chorus. And from start to finish, and it was a really raw, garage rock, kick-ass version of Detroit Rock City. It was unbelievable. Sadly, that was the last time that the original members of Kiss actually ever recorded anything together. And this is one of we had this incredible track, and when we put out the soundtrack album, it's one of those things where you do everything you can for quality control, and then it just takes one person to screw it up. Somehow, after we handed the tapes to Polygram Records to master it, somehow what was in it was the recording of Detroit Rock City from double platinum. Somehow that ended up instead of what we had. So on the soundtrack album, instead of this incredible version, it's the version done for double platinum. But I have that recording, and it's like, oh, you know, I think it might just have, now I think there's enough time gone by that if it got out there on the internet, they wouldn't really care, but it's something to hear, you know. But what's interesting is, I know that there have been times when each one of the guys has not been happy with the other. They've written about it, they've talked about it, and all I could say is that somehow when they get together for the music, when they get together for the show, when everything else is away, when the wives are away, when the business managers are away, and it's just them making music, they're the best brothers in the world. They love each other. And it's really kind of sad to me to see the stuff that happens, but it really seems to happen when other people get involved and start whispering in their ears and say, you know, Gene said this about you, and Paul said, but it's crazy, because I mean, I was there, and the love and camaraderie and the energy, it's Kiss.
Great. What's the hard trivia question?
All right, this is a real geeky, it's what is the Wolfman's middle name? Now, his character's name is Larry Talbot, but what is Lawrence Talbert's middle name? It's Stewart. And the reason why I know that is, at the beginning of Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, the very first shot is on, all right, well, the very first shot of the movie is on his tombstone, and it says Lawrence Stewart Talbot, and the camera moves back. I just happened to notice that.
Who's that name was big trip not put the last names out in the phone call?
Oh, I'm sorry, what was that question? Yeah. Well, Trip, what happened was, and that was fun because it was really interesting that the actors, Eddie Furlong, Sam Huntington, James DeBello, and Giuseppe Andrews, I wouldn't say they were big Kiss fans. Maybe the closest one was Giuseppe Andrews, because his dad was actually a very prominent studio musician. He's the guy playing the guitar on Staying Alive. And he is a musician. He's the only one who really was a musician. So I kind of gave them history lessons. I actually, me and Gene gave them each a copy of History, and got them copies of all the first albums up to '78, and gave them DVDs, and got them in the zone. And so that when they said stuff like, oh, Peter's real name, Peter Kriskula, Paul Frehley, Stanley Eisenberg, and Gene Klein, we wanted it to seem like they really knew that, and they really were saying it, and they weren't just repeating a line in a script. And it was they really pulled it off, and you know, by the end of it, they were all diehard Kiss fans, and still are, you know. But what happened was he forgot to give his name, so that's why he didn't win the contest, man. Because he hung, you know, you win a contest, but then you got to let the radio and the station know what your name is, you know, and he hung up before he gave it, so when they got there, they gave it to someone else.
With you know, New Line's history and your history,
Yes.
and Gene's, you know, horror fan, was there any talk of you guys collaborating on a horror movie or something?
The question is, with New Line's history in horror, Nightmare on Elm Street, and mine, and Gene's, and Adam Rifkin, who had done, you know, horror movies, Dark Backward. The question was there any ever talk of us collaborating on the horror movie? And the answer is a big yes. While we were making Detroit Rock City, Gene, Adam, and I formed a little company, and we set up two projects. We set up a movie at New Line called Real Monsters. And it was going to be a sort of kind of Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein, you know, rock and roll horror movie. Gene and I were producing it. Adam was writing and directing it. Adam wrote the script. It was very, very funny. It was written for Bill Paxton and John Goodman. And The other thing we set up, it was so easy because until, in this period, I call it the platinum visa time. When you are making a movie, there is about a year between when you're working on it and when it actually comes out. So whether or not it's a success or a failure hasn't been determined yet. So everybody kisses your butt because if it turns out to be the biggest hit of all time, they want to make sure they're on your good side and they got your next project. So we really took advantage of that. And Adam and I came up with this idea for a movie called Chillerama, a TV show called Chillerama. And Gene was going to be the host. And it was sort of like the Twilight Zone. Gene is the host, but the idea was that it was like the Breakfast Club. There was like these kids who every week got involved in a different supernatural experience. So each week was its own story, but it had continuing characters. So it was an anthology with recurring characters. We made posters, we went into MTV, sold it on the spot. So here we are before Detroit Rock City comes out, and we got the movie, we got the TV show. Me and Adam wrote, the scripts exist. Gene was so excited. Well, then a little movie, The Blair Witch Project and The Sixth Sense, okay? New Line, we always said, it's a little crude, but New Line could sell acting medicine to kids. I'm sorry, I forget what it was. New Line was so good at promoting that they never failed. And August 13th they always own that date. When you make a movie and you decide when you're going to put it out, it's a science. And they look at the dates and they say, okay, August 13th, the big summer movies had already come out in May, June, and July, and there's 2 weeks left of summer before school starts, and there's the studios are usually just have their leftover movies they don't. So if you have something that's really cool and good and get it, you could be a huge blockbuster. And they had done it with Spawn, they had done it with Lost in Space, they had done it. So we grabbed that date and we were set. And you look at what's going to be coming out the week before and to see if there's any competition. And there was this movie that was, shot on video called Blair Witch, and we were like, shot on video. And then there's this movie with, some supernatural thing with Bruce Willis called The Sixth Sense, and Bruce Willis hadn't had a hit in 5 years. So we thought we were golden. But then those movies came out, and they made millions. So what happened is the theaters that had booked Detroit Rock City, half of them dumped us to have extra screens for those other two movies. So we lost half our theaters. And when it came out, it did not do well at all. It bombed. But the reason was, it's like a movie can't do well if there's nowhere to go and see it. So it was hardly playing anywhere. As a result of it bombing, suddenly New Line decided not to make Real Monsters, and MTV decided not to make Chillerama. And that's how it is. That's just how it is. But, I was very lucky. I went on to write and direct horror movies. I bounced right back. I left New Line and I did 2001 Maniacs with Robert Englund, which was another dream come true. Adam has not stopped making movies, and Gene did pretty well. So, he's good. Yes? Oh, this is the guy who watches Detroit Rock City twice a week, by the way.
Every week, without fail. Are we going to do another Maniacs movie after this?
2003 Maniacs? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's going to be Buckman versus Buckman.
Dude!
Because Robert Englund played... Yeah, Robert Englund played him in the first one, and Bill Moseley played him in the second. But I purposely had them wear the eye patch on a different eye so that I could come back later and say they were brothers. So in the third one, we're going to have them come back, and it's going to be, like the Civil War within the Maniacs, Buckman versus Buckman.
Please tell me when you're filming. I'm going to bomb it.
You can come be one of the Southern Maniacs. We might have to, I don't know, might have to really get a look going for you to look like that.
Oh,
but,
yeah, really? Be that hard?
Other questions? Yes.
I have on good authority that you do some awesome imitations.
Did I do some awesome what?
Imitations.
I'm told I do a pretty good Ace Frehley. And I was like, hey Tim, can Monique get a cameo in Detroit Rock City? You know, but one time we were doing a radio show and I was doing that, and Ace called in, and it was like dueling Ace. You know, it was really fun. But I've had some experiences with Ace. Let me tell you, he is. I love him to death, and God bless him. He's 5 or more years sober. But there were times that I felt like I was kidnapped by Ace Frehley and forced to go on these wild adventures. That a lot of fun.
I got a quick one. How'd you come up with Mystery, and who came up with the name for the band?
Mystery was all Carl Dupre. I really don't know where he came up with that, but interestingly enough, this was created for the movie. Mystery is the name of the band that the kids have in the movie. And about a year after the movie came out, a skateboard company in San Diego, California started having this whole line of Mystery t-shirts and baseball caps and skateboards, and they literally just stole the logo because the owner of it was a huge Detroit Rock City fan. I was thrilled. I just called them up and they got nervous, and I said, just send me t-shirts. I got so much stuff, me and Adam Rifkin, but then Gene found out about it. And they don't exist anymore.
Any more questions, guys? All right, well, let's give it up for Mr. Tim Sullivan. This is his product. We all know the movie Detroit Rock City. He has them for sale over in the other room.
I'll sign it for you for $20, the Blu-ray. I'm in the other room, and it's kick-ass loaded Blu-ray. So thank you.